Welcome to tonight's journey, welcome to tonight's story, designed specifically for sleep. You don't need to remember any of this. Simply find a comfortable position, turn off your lights, and let your mind drift as we explore the mundane mysteries of ancient Brazil. The volume will gradually decrease after 50 minutes to help you transition into peaceful sleep. Tonight, we journey to Serra da Capivara National Park in northeastern Brazil, where red sandstone cliffs hold secrets that archaeologists have been quietly debating for decades. The park contains over 30,000 rock paintings, some dating back 25,000 years, making them among the oldest known human artworks in the Americas. Dr. Niart Gaiden, a French-Brazilian archaeologist, spent 40 years studying these formations. Her work was methodical, repetitive, often involving hours of careful brushing and cataloguing. She documented thousands of paintings depicting hunting scenes, rituals, and geometric patterns that seemed to follow no recognizable cultural tradition. The paintings show human figures with elongated limbs engaged in activities that appear both familiar and strange. Some scenes depict large groups gathered around what might be fires, but the flames are painted in unusual spiraling patterns that don't match typical artistic representations of fire from other prehistoric cultures. In 1973, Gaiden's team discovered charcoal fragments beneath several rock shelters. Carbon dating suggested human presence as early as 50,000 years ago, a finding that contradicted established theories about human migration to the Americas. The scientific community responded with skepticism, demanding more evidence. The excavation process was painstakingly slow. Each layer of sediment was removed grain by grain, sifted through fine mesh screens, and catalogued with obsessive precision. Workers spent entire days collecting tiny fragments of bone, charcoal, and stone tools, most of which revealed nothing significant. Among the more mundane discoveries were thousands of stone scrapers, each requiring careful measurement and documentation. The tools showed consistent manufacturing techniques across millennia, suggesting stable cultural transmission. Yet there were gaps in the archaeological record, periods of centuries where human activity seemed to cease entirely. The rock paintings themselves present another puzzle. While many depict recognizable activities like hunting and gathering, others show abstract symbols that resist interpretation. Circular patterns with radiating lines appear repeatedly, sometimes accompanied by human figures in poses that suggest reverence or fear. Local indigenous communities, primarily the Fulniwai people, maintain oral traditions about the area, but their stories speak of places that were already ancient when their ancestors arrived. They describe the painted rocks as markers left by the people who came before, beings who possessed knowledge that was lost when they departed. The terrain around Serra da Capivara is harsh and unforgiving. Temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius during the day, dropping to uncomfortable coolness at night. Water sources are scarce and seasonal, yet archaeological evidence suggests continuous or repeated human habitation, spanning tens of thousands of years. Modern visitors to the park often comment on the oppressive silence that settles over the landscape during midday hours. The only sounds are occasional bird calls and the whisper of wind through thorny vegetation. It's easy to imagine how ancient people might have found both shelter and spiritual significance in these towering rock formations. The park's remote location has helped preserve its archaeological treasures, but it has also limited research funding and international attention. Many significant sites remain unexcavated. their secrets buried under layers of sediment and centuries of neglect. As we'll explore in the chapters that follow, Serra da Capivara holds evidence of human ingenuity, adaptation, and mysterious disappearances that challenge our understanding of prehistoric South America. The story unfolds slowly, like the careful work of archaeology itself, revealing fragments of truth embedded in layers of time and speculation. The arrival that shouldn't have happened. The conventional timeline of human migration to the Americas places the first arrivals at around 15,000 years ago, crossing from Asia via the Bering Land Bridge. These early peoples, known as the Clovis culture, gradually spread southward, reaching South America thousands of years later. But the evidence at Serra da Capivara suggests a different story entirely. In 1986, archaeologists uncovered a hearth containing charcoal fragments that dated to 48,000 years before present. The discovery was made in a rock shelter designated as Boqueirão da Pedra Furada, a mundane name for what might be one of the most significant archaeological sites in the Americas. The excavation team, working in oppressive heat and choking dust, spent months carefully exposing this ancient fire pit. The work was tedious, involving the removal of thousands of pounds of sediment using small brushes and dental picks. Each fragment of charcoal was photographed in place before being carefully extracted and sealed in sterile containers. Dating. Techniques confirmed that humans were present in this region far earlier than previously thought possible. But the scientific establishment remained skeptical. How could humans have reached South America so early? What route could they have taken? The questions multiplied faster than answers. Additional excavations revealed stone tools associated with these early dates. The implements were crude but functional, showing clear signs of human manufacture and use. Microscopic analysis revealed traces of plant and animal materials on the cutting edges, evidence of practical daily activities carried out by people whose existence challenged established archaeological theories. The tools themselves were unremarkable, shaped from local quartzite through simple percussion techniques. Making such implements required no special skill or advanced knowledge, just patience and repetitive action. Yet their presence at such early dates implied a human story that mainstream archaeology wasn't ready to accept. Local geology added another layer of complexity to the dating controversy. The rock shelters had been formed over millions of years through gradual erosion and tectonic activity. Understanding the site's formation required expertise in multiple scientific disciplines, from geology to climatology to archaeology. Climate records suggested that conditions in northeastern Brazil 48,000 years ago were significantly different from today. The region was wetter, supporting more diverse vegetation and larger animal populations. Rivers that are now seasonal would have flowed year-round, providing reliable water sources for early human populations. Yet even under more favorable conditions, survival in this environment would have required sophisticated knowledge of local resources. Early inhabitants would have needed to identify edible plants, locate seasonal water sources, and develop hunting strategies adapted to local animal behaviors. The rock paintings at Boqueirão da Pedra Furada include some of the site's oldest artistic expressions. These early images are simple compared to later works, consisting mainly of handprints and basic geometric shapes. The pigments used were created from local materials, primarily iron oxides that gave the paintings their characteristic red coloration. Creating these pigments required knowledge of mineral processing techniques. The iron oxides had to be ground to specific consistencies, mixed with binding agents, and applied using tools that have not survived in the archaeological record. The process was time-consuming and labor-intensive, suggesting that artistic expression held significant cultural importance. Some researchers have proposed alternative explanations for the early dates at Serra de Natural fires, they argue, could have created charcoal deposits that appear to be associated with human activity. Geological processes might have mixed older and younger materials, creating misleading stratigraphic associations. These criticisms reflect the conservative nature of archaeological interpretation. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the implications of 48,000-year-old human presence in South America are indeed extraordinary. They would require rethinking fundamental assumptions about human migration patterns and capabilities. The debate continues in academic journals and conference presentations, conducted in the dry language of scientific discourse. Meanwhile, the rock shelters of Serra da Capivara continue their slow erosion, gradually releasing their secrets or destroying them forever. The vanishing people of the Red Earth between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago. The archaeological record at Serra da Capivara shows evidence of a sophisticated hunter-gatherer society that seemed to vanish abruptly. Their tools became more refined, their rock art more complex, and their settlements more permanent. Then, suddenly, the evidence stops. The people of this period, whom researchers informally call the Red Earth culture, due to their use of iron oxide pigments, left behind tantalizing clues about their daily lives. Excavations have revealed carefully constructed hearths, organized tool caches, and evidence of long-term occupation at multiple sites throughout the park. Their stone tool technology showed remarkable consistency across different sites and time periods. Projectile points were manufactured according to specific design principles, with standardized proportions and finishing techniques. This suggests either a shared cultural tradition or contact between different groups across the region. The most intriguing aspect of the Red Earth culture was their apparent mastery of pigment production. Chemical analysis of their rock paintings reveals complex mineral compositions that would have required sophisticated processing techniques. They combined iron oxides with manganese compounds, plant-based binders, and other materials to create paints that have survived for millennia. Dr. Guyden's team spent countless hours analyzing these pigments under laboratory conditions. The work involved grinding tiny samples to powder, subjecting them to spectrographic analysis, and comparing the results with geological samples from the surrounding area. Most of this research produced mundane results, confirming the local origin of materials and standard mineral compositions, but some samples revealed unexpected elements that shouldn't have been present in the local geology. Trace amounts of minerals typically found hundreds of kilometers away appeared in certain paintings, suggesting either long-distance trade networks or knowledge of specialized extraction techniques. The Red Earth people's rock art evolved over time, becoming increasingly complex and abstract. Early paintings depicted straightforward hunting scenes and human figures. Later works incorporated elaborate geometric patterns, spiral motifs, and scenes that seemed to represent ceremonial or religious activities. One particularly puzzling series of paintings appears to show human figures interacting with objects that don't correspond to any known tools or artifacts from the period. These objects are depicted as elongated forms with geometric decorations, held or manipulated by human figures in what appear to be ritualistic poses. Archaeological excavations have failed to uncover any physical artifacts that match these painted objects. This absence is strange, given the generally excellent preservation conditions at Serra da Capivara. Stone, bone, and even some organic materials have survived for thousands of years. Yet these mysterious implements have left no trace. The disappearance of the red earth culture coincides with significant climate change in northeastern Brazil. Around 8,000 years ago, the region became increasingly arid, forcing changes in vegetation patterns and animal populations. Many of the large mammals depicted in earlier rock art became extinct during this period. Climate change alone, however, doesn't fully explain the abrupt end of red earth cultural markers. Other prehistoric societies in the region adapted to changing conditions, developing new tools and strategies suited to arid environments. But the distinctive artistic and technological traditions of the red earth people simply stopped appearing in the archaeological record. Some researchers have proposed that the red earth people migrated to other regions as conditions became unfavorable. But extensive surveys in surrounding areas have failed to identify clear cultural continuities. Their distinctive tool, technologies, and artistic styles don't appear in later archaeological contexts. Anywhere in South America, the alternative explanation is less comfortable to consider. The red earth culture may have collapsed entirely, its people scattered or absorbed into other groups, its specialized knowledge lost forever. Such cultural extinctions are not unknown in the archaeological record, but they leave troubling questions about human adaptability and the fragility of accumulated knowledge. Local oral traditions preserve vague memories of people who went into the rocks during times of great hardship. These stories describe individuals or small groups who entered the deepest cave systems in the area and never emerged. Modern exploration of these caves has revealed some human remains, but dating and identification remain incomplete. The mystery of the red earth people's disappearance exemplifies one of archaeology's most frustrating limitations. The discipline excels at identifying what happened, but struggles to explain why. We can document the end of a culture through stratigraphy and radiocarbon dating, but understanding the human decisions and experiences behind that ending remains largely beyond our reach. Asterisk, the geometric obsession around 7,000 years ago. A new artistic tradition emerged at Serra da Capivara that differed dramatically from earlier representational art. Instead of depicting animals, humans, and recognizable objects, these later artists became obsessed with complex geometric patterns that seemed to follow mathematical principles unknown to modern researchers. The geometric paintings appear suddenly in the archaeological record, with no apparent transitional period from earlier artistic styles. This abrupt change suggests either the arrival of new people with different cultural traditions or a dramatic shift in the worldview of existing populations. These geometric works required extensive planning and preparation. Unlike the spontaneous handprints and simple animal figures of earlier periods, the later patterns show evidence of careful measurement and systematic execution. Some designs span entire rock faces, requiring coordination between multiple artists, working over extended periods. The mathematical precision of these patterns became apparent only through detailed photographic documentation and computer analysis. Dr. Guyden's team spent years creating accurate scaled drawings of the geometric paintings, a process that involved climbing precarious scaffolding and working in extreme heat for hours at a time. Analysis revealed that many patterns were based on complex proportional relationships. Spirals followed precise mathematical curves, while linear patterns incorporated specific angular relationships that repeated across different sites. The level of mathematical sophistication suggested knowledge that seemed inconsistent with hunter-gatherer societies. Some patterns appear to represent star charts or astronomical observations. Circular designs with radiating lines correspond. Roughly 2 seasonal positions of celestial objects visible from Serra da Capivara. Other patterns might represent calendrical systems, tracking lunar cycles or seasonal changes important for survival in the region's harsh environment. The creation of these astronomical paintings would have required generations of careful observation and knowledge transmission. Sky-watching specialists would have needed to maintain consistent records over decades, developing symbolic systems to encode their observations in permanent rock art. But not all geometric patterns have obvious practical explanations. Many designs seem purely abstract, following aesthetic principles that remain incomprehensible to modern viewers. These include intricate maze-like patterns, recursive geometric forms, and combinations of elements that create visual effects suggesting advanced understanding of optical illusions. The most puzzling geometric paintings incorporate elements that seem to represent three-dimensional objects rendered in sophisticated perspective. These drawings show geometric solids, architectural structures, and mechanical devices that don't correspond to any known prehistoric technologies. One frequently depicted motif resembles a complex mechanical device with interlocking circular components. The device appears in dozens of paintings across different sites, always rendered with consistent proportions and internal relationships. Yet no physical evidence of such devices has ever been discovered. Archaeological excavations from this period reveal a society that was technologically simple, relying on basic stone tools and organic materials that have not survived. The contrast between their apparent technological limitations and the sophisticated geometric knowledge displayed in their art creates a perplexing contradiction. Some researchers have suggested that the geometric patterns represent spiritual or shamanic visions rather than observations of physical reality. Altered states of consciousness induced through fasting, meditation, or psychoactive substances might have inspired abstract artistic expressions that appeared meaningful to their creators but remain opaque to outside observers. This psychological explanation gains some support from ethnographic studies of contemporary indigenous societies. Many groups use geometric patterns in their art to represent spiritual experiences, cosmological concepts, or mythological narratives that don't translate easily into literal interpretations. However, the mathematical precision of the Serra da Capivara patterns exceeds what would typically be expected from visionary or spiritual art. The consistent, proportional relationships and systematic variations suggest deliberate intellectual activity rather than spontaneous artistic expression. The geometric tradition at Serra da Capivara lasted for approximately 2,000 years, before gradually giving way to simpler artistic styles. This decline coincided with increasing aridity in the region and evidence of population stress, suggesting that the specialized knowledge required to create these complex patterns may have been lost during periods of cultural disruption. The final geometric paintings show signs of declining technical skill and mathematical understanding. Proportional relationships become less precise. Patterns show more variation and inconsistency, and the overall complexity of designs decreases. By 5,000 years ago, the tradition had ended entirely. Modern attempts to recreate these geometric patterns have proven surprisingly difficult. Even with modern mathematical tools and computer assistance, researchers struggle to understand the underlying principles that guided their ancient creators. The knowledge system that produced these works remains as mysterious as the people who created them. The underground chambers. In 1991, ground-penetrating radar surveys at Serra da Capivara revealed extensive underground chamber systems beneath several major rock art sites. These cavities appeared to be natural formations enlarged through human modification, creating spaces that might have served ceremonial or storage functions for the area's prehistoric inhabitants. The discovery was made almost by accident during routine geological surveys intended to assess the stability of rock formations for conservation purposes. The radar signatures showed regular geometric patterns inconsistent with natural cave formation, suggesting deliberate human intervention in shaping these underground spaces. Initial exploration of the chamber systems required months of careful excavation to create safe access points. The work proceeded slowly, with archaeologists removing tons of accumulated sediment and debris that had filled the entrances over thousands of years. Most of this material yielded little of interest beyond standard geological samples and occasional stone tool fragments. The largest chamber system, located beneath the Torre do Boqueirão da Pedra Fura da Saichi, consists of 7 interconnected rooms extending more than 50 meters into the rock formation. The walls show clear evidence of human modification, including smooth surfaces, carved niches, and artificial ventilation shafts. Carbon dating of organic materials found within. The chamber suggests human use beginning around 8,000 years ago and continuing intermittently for several thousand years. This corresponds with the period of geometric rock art production, suggesting possible connections between the underground spaces and the complex artistic traditions of the same era. The chambers contained remarkably few artifacts, considering their apparent importance and the effort required to create them. Excavations yielded only scattered stone tools, fragments of bone, and small amounts of charcoal from ancient fires. This paucity of material culture suggests that the spaces served specialized functions that didn't require extensive tool use or permanent habitation. More intriguing were the modifications to the chamber walls themselves. Several rooms contain carved geometric patterns that echo the designs found in surface rock art. These underground carvings required sophisticated planning and execution, as they were created in complete darkness using only primitive tools and firelight. The acoustic properties of the chambers are remarkable. Sound carries clearly between distant rooms, and certain locations within the system produce distinct echo effects. These acoustic characteristics might have been intentional, designed to enhance ceremonial activities or facilitate communication between different areas of the complex. Dr. Guyton's team spent considerable time documenting the precise measurements and geometric relationships of the chamber system. This work involved surveying techniques borrowed from mining engineering, creating three-dimensional maps of spaces that had remained hidden for millennia. The survey work revealed that the chamber layout follows geometric principles similar to those found in the surface rock art. Room proportions, corridor angles, and the relationships between different spaces show mathematical consistency that seems unlikely to have occurred by chance. One chamber contains a series of circular depressions, carved into the floor in a pattern that matches star positions visible from Serra da Capivara during specific seasons. If this interpretation is correct, the underground space might have served as a kind of primitive planetarium or astronomical observatory. Other chambers show evidence of having been deliberately sealed at some point in their history. Stone walls were constructed to block access, and these barriers were then concealed with careful camouflage. The reasons for this abandonment and concealment remain unclear. Local indigenous traditions speak of underground spaces that were considered sacred or dangerous. These oral histories describe places where ancestors went to communicate with spirits or to undergo initiation ceremonies. Some stories warn against entering certain caves, claiming they lead to places from which people don't return. Modern exploration of the chamber systems has encountered several unexplained phenomena. Electronic equipment frequently malfunctions in certain areas, though geological surveys have found no obvious explanation for such interference. Temperature variations within the chambers don't correspond to expected thermal patterns, and some areas remain consistently cooler than others, despite similar geological conditions. The most puzzling discovery within the chambers was a series of small, perfectly spherical stone objects found in one of the sealed rooms. These spheres range in diameter from 2 to 6 centimeters and show no obvious tool marks or signs of artificial shaping. Yet their perfect geometric form seems inconsistent with natural stone formation processes. Chemical analysis of the spheres revealed they were composed of local quartzite, but with unusual mineral inclusions not found in other stone tools from the site. The spheres showed evidence of prolonged handling, with smooth, polished surfaces that suggested they had been manipulated frequently over extended periods. No similar objects have been found at other prehistoric sites in South America, making their function and significance purely speculative. They might have served as counting devices, ceremonial objects, or components of some unknown technology. Their presence in a sealed chamber suggests they held special importance for the people who created them. Asterisk, the whispering stones among the thousands of decorated rock surfaces at Serra da Capivara. Approximately 30 stones produce distinct acoustic phenomena when struck or exposed to wind currents. These singing rocks emit tones ranging from low drones to high-pitched whistles, creating an eerie soundscape that might have held special significance for the area's prehistoric inhabitants. The acoustic properties result from specific geological formations and deliberate human modifications. Natural wind erosion had created cavities and channels within the rock surfaces, but these were systematically enlarged and refined through human intervention to produce desired sound effects. Dr. Guyton first noticed the acoustic phenomena during routine documentation work in 1989, while photographing rock art panels during a particularly windy day. She observed that certain painted surfaces produced distinct musical tones when air passed through small openings in the rock. Subsequent investigation revealed an entire network of acoustically modified stones throughout the park. The sound-producing modifications required sophisticated understanding of acoustic principles. The creators had to calculate the precise dimensions and relationships of chambers, channels, and openings to produce specific tonal effects. This knowledge seems inconsistent with the simple tool technologies found in contemporary archaeological contexts. Recording and analyzing these stone instruments proved technically challenging. The sounds are often subtle and dependent on specific weather conditions. Research teams spent months camping at different sites, waiting for optimal wind conditions to document the full range of acoustic effects. Frequency analysis revealed that many of the tones correspond to mathematical ratios found in musical scales. Some stones produce perfect fifths, octaves, and other harmonic intervals that suggest deliberate tuning rather than accidental acoustic properties. This implies that the creators possessed sophisticated understanding of musical mathematics. The geographic distribution of singing stones follows patterns that might represent acoustic communication networks. Stones with similar tonal properties are positioned within audible range of each other, creating chains of acoustic sites that span several kilometers across the park's landscape. Experimental archaeology has attempted to recreate the stone modification techniques, but modern efforts have failed to achieve the acoustic precision found in the prehistoric examples. Contemporary stoneworkers, using both traditional and modern tools, cannot replicate the subtle sound-shaping modifications that ancient craftspeople accomplished with simple percussion implements. The acoustic stones are often associated with the most complex rock art panels in the park. Sites with singing stones typically contain elaborate geometric patterns, astronomical symbols, and the mysterious mechanical devices depicted in many paintings. This association suggests integrated cultural systems combining visual and auditory elements. Some acoustic sites show evidence of having been used for extended periods. Smooth wear patterns around sound-producing openings indicate repeated handling and manipulation. These usage traces suggest that the stones served active functions rather than passive acoustic effects triggered only by wind. Local indigenous communities retain oral traditions describing ancient ceremonies involving singing stones. These stories speak of rituals conducted during specific seasons, when particular stones would speak to guide important decisions or communicate with ancestral spirits. The traditions describe trained specialists who understood the language of the stones and could interpret their sounds for the broader community. These acoustic interpreters supposedly underwent lengthy training to develop the sensitivity required to understand subtle variations in tone and timing. Attempts to correlate traditional stories with archaeological evidence have produced mixed results. Some described locations match known acoustic sites, while others refer to stones that have not been identified or may have been destroyed by natural erosion over the centuries. The acoustic properties of some stones have changed over time due to weathering and geological processes. Sounds that were once clear and distinct have become muted or altered as rock surfaces deteriorate. This gradual loss of acoustic function represents an irreversible erosion of prehistoric cultural heritage. Climate change poses additional threats to the surviving acoustic stones. Changing precipitation patterns and increased temperature extremes accelerate rock weathering, potentially silencing these ancient instruments faster than they can be studied and documented. Recent digital modeling attempts have tried to reconstruct the original acoustic properties of partially damaged stones. Computer simulations based on detailed 3D scans can predict how these instruments might have sounded when they were first created, offering glimpses into prehistoric soundscapes that no living person has experienced. The singing stones of Serra da Capivara represent one of the world's oldest known acoustic technologies, yet their creators and the knowledge systems that produced them remain anonymous, their intentions and cultural meanings lost to time. The stones continue to whisper their ancient songs, but the language in which they speak has been forgotten. The Bone Riddle in 1994, excavations at the Tocada Entrada do Pajau site uncovered a deposit containing over 3,000 carefully arranged animal bones, representing species that had been extinct in the region for more than 10,000 years. The bones showed no evidence of having been consumed as food, instead appearing to have been collected and arranged, according to some unknown organizational system. The bone deposit was discovered during routine excavation of what appeared to be an ordinary midden site. Initial expectations were for typical food refuse and discarded tools, but careful exposure revealed a deliberate arrangement that suggested ritual or symbolic purposes rather than utilitarian disposal. The bones represented at least 30 different animal species, including several varieties of giant ground sloths, primitive horses, and large carnivores that disappeared from South America during the late Pleistocene extinctions. Most of these animals would have been unavailable to the site's human inhabitants, who lived thousands of years after the extinctions occurred. Carbon dating confirmed that the bones were indeed ancient, predating human occupation of the site by several millennia. This created a puzzle about how later peoples had acquired and transported these fossils to create their mysterious arrangement. The organizational pattern of the bone deposit became apparent only through meticulous excavation and documentation. Each bone was photographed in place, its position recorded with survey instruments, and its relationship to neighboring bones carefully mapped. The process required months of tedious fieldwork in oppressive heat. Analysis of the arrangement revealed mathematical relationships between bone positions that seemed too complex to have occurred by chance. Bones were grouped according to species, arranged in geometric patterns, and positioned at specific distances that followed proportional relationships found elsewhere in Cerrada, Capivara's rock art. Some bones had been modified after collection, showing evidence of careful cleaning, polishing, and in some cases, carving. These modifications would have required considerable time and effort, suggesting that the bones held special significance beyond their value as curiosities or raw materials. The most intriguing modifications were a series of small holes drilled through long bones at precise intervals. These perforations followed mathematical progressions with spacing that created harmonic ratios when the bones were used as wind instruments. Several of the modified bones still produced musical tones when air was blown through them. Chemical analysis of the bone surfaces revealed traces of pigments similar to those used in the site's rock art. Some bones had been painted with geometric patterns that matched designs found on nearby rock faces, suggesting integration between different artistic media and symbolic systems. The effort required to collect, transport, and arrange this bone assemblage would have been enormous. The bones represented animals from diverse habitats across a wide geographic area, requiring extensive knowledge of fossil locations and sophisticated organizational capabilities to accumulate such a comprehensive collection. Ethnographic parallels suggest that some indigenous societies collected and curated fossils for ritual or educational purposes. These bones might have served as teaching aids, helping to transmit knowledge about extinct animals and past environmental conditions to younger generations. Alternative interpretations propose that the bone arrangement served astronomical or calendrical functions. The positions of different bone groups might have corresponded to seasonal positions of celestial objects, creating a kind of three-dimensional star chart or timing device for agricultural or ceremonial activities. The preservation conditions at the site were remarkable, allowing survival of organic materials that typically decompose within decades. This exceptional preservation raises questions about the burial environment and whether the bones were deliberately protected through specific preservation techniques unknown to modern archaeology. Some bones showed evidence of having been repeatedly handled and manipulated over extended periods, where patterns suggested that the arrangement was not static but was actively maintained and modified by successive generations of users. This implies continuous cultural transmission of knowledge about the site's significance and proper maintenance procedures. The bone deposit was associated with one of the park's most unusual rock art panels, featuring astronomical symbols and geometric patterns that don't appear elsewhere in the regional artistic tradition. This unique artistic complex might represent specialized knowledge or ceremonial practices that were confined to particular locations or social groups. Local oral traditions include stories about places where the bones of ancient animals were kept by wise elders who could read the history of the land from these remains. These traditions describe knowledge keepers who understood the relationships between past and present, using fossil collections to teach about environmental changes and survival strategies. Modern paleontological surveys in the Serra da Capivara region have confirmed the presence of extensive fossil deposits from the Pleistocene period. The prehistoric bone collectors would have had access to a rich source of specimens without needing to travel great distances or undertake dangerous expeditions. The selective nature of the bone collection suggests sophisticated understanding of animal classification and ecological relationships. The assemblage wasn't a random accumulation, but a carefully curated collection that represented the full diversity of extinct fauna from the region's prehistoric past. The Vanishing Pigments chemical analysis of rock art pigments at Serra da Capivara has revealed 17 distinct color formulations that don't match any known mineral combinations from the surrounding geology. These mysterious pigments appear in paintings dating from 6,000 to 3,000 years ago, then disappear entirely from the archaeological record without explanation. The discovery of anomalous pigments emerged gradually through routine conservation work conducted by Dr. Guyden's team. Initial chemical tests were intended to identify materials threatening the preservation of rock art, but analysis revealed unexpected elemental compositions that suggested complex manufacturing processes. Standard rock art pigments in the region were created from local iron oxides, manganese compounds, and plant-based binders. These materials produced the familiar reds, browns, and blacks that dominate most painted surfaces. But the mysterious pigments included elements that shouldn't have been available to prehistoric peoples using simple extraction techniques. The most puzzling pigment produced a vibrant blue color that appears in only 37 paintings across 7 different sites. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that this blue contained copper compounds combined with organic materials that have not been identified. Despite extensive testing at multiple laboratories, natural copper deposits don't exist within hundreds of kilometers of Serra da Capivara, and the specific mineral form found in the blue pigment doesn't match any known geological sources in South America. This suggests either long-distance trade relationships or sophisticated processing techniques that could transform common materials into unusual compounds. The blue pigment was used sparingly, appearing only in small details within larger compositions. This selective application might indicate that the material was precious or difficult to obtain. In most cases, blue appears in association with the geometric patterns and astronomical symbols that characterize the most complex artistic works. In the park, laboratory attempts to recreate the blue pigment using traditional techniques and local materials have failed to produce matching chemical signatures. Modern chemists, working with advanced equipment and pure materials, cannot replicate the exact formulation achieved by prehistoric artists using simple tools and processing methods. Another anomalous pigment produced intense yellows and oranges that retain their vibrancy after thousands of years of exposure to harsh environmental conditions. Most organic pigments fade rapidly under the intense ultraviolet radiation and temperature extremes common in northeastern Brazil. Yet these colors remain brilliant and unfaded. The yellow pigment contains sulfur compounds that typically require high temperature processing to produce stable formulations, Creating such materials would have required controlled firing techniques and temperature management beyond the apparent technological capabilities of the societies that produced them. Some paintings show evidence of pigment mixing that created color effects impossible to achieve through simple combination of available materials. These include iridescent effects that change color depending on viewing angle and surfaces that appear to glow. Under certain lighting conditions, the iridescent effects result from microscopic structures within the pigment layers that refract light in specific ways. Creating such optical properties requires understanding of physical principles that weren't formally described by science until the 19th century. Yet prehistoric artists somehow achieved these effects using unknown techniques. Microscopic analysis reveals that the anomalous pigments were applied using methods that differ from standard rock art techniques. Instead of simple brushing or finger painting, these materials show evidence of having been applied in multiple thin layers, creating complex optical effects through controlled interference patterns. The layering technique required precise timing and environmental control. Each layer had to dry to exact specifications before the next could be applied, and the entire process had to be completed under specific humidity and temperature conditions. This level of technical sophistication seems inconsistent with the simple tool technologies found in contemporary archaeological contexts. Some pigment formulations contain biological materials that have been identified as coming from specific plant species, but in combinations that don't occur naturally. These hybrid organic compounds suggest deliberate genetic modification or selective breeding programs that created plants with desired chemical properties. The disappearance of these sophisticated pigments from the archaeological record coincides with evidence of population decline and cultural disruption in the Serra da Capivara region. Climate change, resource depletion, or social conflicts might have disrupted the specialized knowledge systems required to produce these complex materials. Conservation efforts have focused on documenting and preserving examples of the anomalous pigments before they are lost to natural weathering processes. High-resolution photography, chemical analysis, and digital modeling create permanent records of these mysterious formulations for future research. Yet, despite decades of study and technological advances in analytical chemistry, the secrets of these prehistoric pigments remain largely intact. The knowledge systems that produced them have vanished as completely as the colors themselves, leaving only traces of human ingenuity that we can observe but not fully understand. Asterisk. The calendar stones hidden among the thousands of decorated rock surfaces at Serra da Capivara are 43 stones, containing intricate patterns that appear to function as sophisticated astronomical calendars. These calendar stones track lunar cycles, seasonal changes, and celestial events with mathematical precision that rivals modern astronomical calculations. The calendar function of these decorated stones was discovered accidentally during digital documentation projects in the early 2000s. Computer analysis of photographic records revealed mathematical relationships between carved symbols and astronomical phenomena that hadn't been apparent. Two researchers studying individual stones in isolation. The most complete calendar stone is located at the Tokadu Cosmos site, a rock shelter that faces southeast toward the horizon where important celestial events occur throughout the year. The carved surface contains over 300 individual symbols arranged in spiral, patterns that correspond to lunar months and seasonal cycles. Each symbol on the calendar stones represents specific astronomical observations, encoded in geometric form. Circles indicate full moons, crescents mark lunar phases, and complex geometric figures correspond to the positions of bright stars and planets visible from the Serra da Capivara region. The precision of these astronomical records exceeds what would typically be expected from hunter-gatherer societies. The calendar stones track subtle celestial phenomena like the precession of equinoxes and long-term variations in planetary orbits that require decades of careful observation to detect and document. Creating these calendar systems would have required specialized astronomical knowledge maintained across multiple generations. Skywatching specialists would have needed to observe, record, and transmit complex mathematical relationships over periods spanning centuries or millennia. The calendar stones show evidence of regular maintenance and updating. New symbols were added periodically to track previously unrecorded phenomena, and existing markings were modified to improve accuracy as observational techniques became more sophisticated. Some calendar stones incorporate predictive elements that forecast future astronomical events based on observed patterns. These predictions include eclipse dates, planetary conjunctions, and the return of comets that appear at regular intervals spanning decades. The mathematical sophistication required for such predictions suggests knowledge of complex astronomical cycles that weren't formally recognized by European science until the Renaissance. Yet prehistoric observers at Serra da Capivara somehow identified and encoded these patterns using simple geometric symbols carved into rock surfaces. Dr. Guyton's team spent years correlating the calendar stone symbols with historical astronomical records. This tedious work involved comparing thousands of carved marks with computer-generated models of ancient sky conditions, a process that required expertise in both archaeology and astronomy. The correlation work revealed that the calendar stones tracked not only obvious phenomena like lunar phases and seasonal changes, but also subtle variations in the apparent brightness of stars, the timing of meteor showers, and the positions of planets that are barely visible to the naked eye. Some symbols appear to represent astronomical events that occur only once every several centuries. These rare phenomena would have been observed by only a few generations of prehistoric astronomers. Yet the knowledge was somehow preserved and incorporated into the permanent calendar systems. The geographic distribution of calendar stones suggests a coordinated astronomical observation network spanning the entire Serra da Capivara region. Different sites specialized in tracking specific types of celestial phenomena, with information shared between locations through unknown communication systems. The most sophisticated calendar stone contains corrections for the accumulated errors that occur in simple lunar calendars over extended periods. These mathematical adjustments demonstrate understanding of complex astronomical relationships that require advanced mathematical concepts to calculate accurately. Local indigenous traditions describe ancient ceremonies timed according to astronomical events tracked by the calendar stones. These rituals supposedly marked important seasonal transitions, agricultural activities, and social gatherings that required precise timing to ensure community survival and cultural continuity. Modern attempts to use the calendar stones for astronomical prediction have produced mixed results. While the major patterns are clear and accurate, many subtle details remain incomprehensible to contemporary researchers. Despite access to advanced mathematical tools and astronomical databases, the gradual abandonment of the calendar stones around 3,000 years ago coincides with evidence of social disruption and population decline throughout the Serra da Capivara region. The specialized knowledge required to maintain these systems apparently couldn't survive the cultural changes that transformed prehistoric Brazilian societies. Some calendar stones show evidence of deliberate destruction or defacement, with key symbols chiseled away or covered with later, cruder markings. This suggests that the astronomical knowledge they represented may have become controversial or dangerous as social and religious systems changed. The loss of astronomical knowledge, represented by the abandoned calendar stones, illustrates the fragility of complex information systems in pre-literate societies. Specialized knowledge that took centuries to develop could appear or disappear within a few generations if the social structures supporting its transmission were disrupted. Conservation efforts now focus on documenting the surviving calendar stones before natural weathering destroys the remaining symbols. High-resolution 3D scanning creates permanent digital records that preserve the mathematical relationships even if the physical stones continue to deteriorate. Yet the full significance of these prehistoric astronomical achievements remains largely unknown. The calendar stones represent sophisticated intellectual accomplishments by anonymous individuals whose names, motivations, and cultural contexts have been lost to time, leaving only their mathematical legacy carved in stone. The final silence around 2,500 years ago, human activity at Serra da Capivara entered a gradual decline that culminated in the complete abandonment of the region's rock art sites. The final paintings are crude and hurried, lacking the mathematical precision and artistic sophistication that characterized earlier periods. Then, abruptly, the creative tradition that had flourished for over 20,000 years simply ended. The decline is visible in the archaeological record through multiple indicators. Tool technologies became simpler and less standardized. Rock art styles showed increasing variation and decreasing technical skill. Evidence of long-term site occupation gave way to signs of temporary, sporadic visits by small groups with limited material culture. Climate data from the period shows increasing aridity and environmental stress throughout northeastern Brazil. Reliable water sources became seasonal or disappeared entirely. Plant and animal populations declined, forcing human communities to adopt more mobile lifestyles that were incompatible with the stable settlements required for complex artistic traditions. The last datable rock paintings at Serra da Capivara were created around 2,000 years ago. These final artistic expressions show none of the sophisticated geometric patterns, astronomical symbols, or mysterious mechanical devices that characterized earlier periods. Instead, they consist mainly of simple animal figures and basic human forms rendered with crude technique. Some of the final paintings appear unfinished, as if their creators were interrupted or abandoned their work before completion. Half-completed geometric patterns trail off into random scratches. Partially painted human figures lack essential details. These incomplete works suggest urgent circumstances or sudden departures. Archaeological evidence indicates that the abandonment of Serra da Capivara wasn't gradual but occurred relatively quickly across multiple sites. Tool caches were left behind, hearths were abandoned with charcoal still present, and living areas show signs of hasty departure rather than planned relocation. The reason for this rapid abandonment remains unclear. Environmental pressures alone don't fully explain why populations didn't adapt to changing conditions as they had during previous climate fluctuations. Something more decisive seems to have occurred, forcing complete abandonment of a region that had supported human populations for tens of thousands of years. Local oral traditions preserve fragmentary memories of this abandonment period. Stories describe times of great hardship when the land became hostile and people were forced to seek new homes in distant places. Some traditions speak of conflicts between different groups, while others describe supernatural events that made continued residence impossible. One persistent oral tradition describes a period when the painted rocks stopped speaking and the underground chambers became dangerous to enter. These stories might preserve memories of the end, of the complex cultural traditions that had given special significance to the region's archaeological sites. Modern archaeological surveys in areas surrounding Serra da Capivara have failed to identify clear evidence of where the region's final inhabitants relocated. Their distinctive tool, technologies, and artistic traditions don't appear in later archaeological contexts anywhere in South America, suggesting either cultural assimilation or population collapse. The abandonment of Serra da Capivara represents one of South America's most significant archaeological mysteries, a region that had been continuously inhabited for millennia, that had produced some of the continent's most sophisticated prehistoric art and technology, simply emptied of human presence and remained largely uninhabited for centuries. European explorers who first visited the region in the 18th century found extensive rock art, galleries but no indigenous populations who claimed cultural connections to the paintings. The artistic traditions that had once flourished at Serra da Capivara had become historical curiosities, their meanings and significance lost to living memory. The silence that settled over Serra da Capivara after its abandonment was broken only by wind, occasional animal sounds, and the gradual weathering processes that continued to erode the rock art legacy left by its vanished inhabitants. The region became a vast outdoor museum containing artistic and technological achievements that no one could interpret or claim. Dr. Guyden's research has documented this prehistoric cultural collapse in meticulous detail, but the human experiences behind the archaeological evidence remain largely inaccessible. We can measure the end of cultural traditions through radiocarbon dating and stratigraphy, but understanding the decisions, emotions, and circumstances that led to abandonment requires speculation that extends beyond available evidence. The mystery of Serra da Capivara's abandonment reflects broader questions about cultural resilience and the factors that enable complex societies to survive environmental and social challenges. The region's prehistoric inhabitants had demonstrated remarkable adaptability for thousands of years, developing sophisticated technologies and knowledge systems. Yet ultimately, something proved too challenging to overcome. Conservation efforts now focus on preserving what remains of this lost civilization's achievements. The rock art galleries, underground chambers, acoustic stones, and calendar systems represent irreplaceable records of human ingenuity and cultural development. Yet, they also serve as reminders of how completely complex societies can disappear, leaving only traces of their former existence. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the mysterious prehistory of Serra da Capivara. As we've seen, the region holds secrets that challenge our understanding of early human capabilities and cultural development. The achievements documented in these rock art galleries represent intellectual and artistic accomplishments that remain largely unexplained despite decades of careful research. The people who created these works remain anonymous, their names and individual stories lost to time. Yet their legacy persists in the painted rock surfaces, carved calendar stones, and modified acoustic instruments that continue to puzzle and inspire contemporary researchers. As you drift towards sleep, Perhaps you'll dream of these ancient artists, working by firelight in rock shelters, carefully mixing pigments whose formulations we still cannot replicate, encoding astronomical knowledge in geometric patterns whose full significance remains mysterious, and creating artistic traditions that flourished for millennia before vanishing into historical silence. Sweet dreams. And thank you for exploring these boring historical mysteries with me tonight. The Copper Mystery in 2003. A routine excavation at the Toca do Serrat, Lieutenant Hugo, site uncovered 3 small copper objects that shouldn't have existed in prehistoric South America. The artifacts consisted of 2 thin sheets with geometric patterns and 1 complex, 3-dimensional form resembling mechanical components. Radiocarbon dating of associated organic materials placed these objects at 4,000 years old, predating known copper metallurgy in the region by over 2,000 years. The discovery occurred during mundane excavation work focused on documenting standard stone tool assemblages. The copper artifacts were found in a sealed context beneath layers of undisturbed sediment, ruling out contamination from later periods or modern materials. Their presence in this archaeological context created immediate controversy within the research community. The Copper Mystery at Serra da Capivara illustrates the limitations of archaeological interpretation when confronted with evidence that doesn't fit established theoretical frameworks. These artifacts represent technological achievements that challenge assumptions about prehistoric capabilities, while providing no clear explanations for their existence or creation. Chapter 12. The Watchers in Stone, the Final Mystery of Serra da Capivara involves a series of rock formations that appear to have been deliberately modified to create the impression of giant faces watching over the landscape. These guardian stones are scattered throughout the park, positioned at strategic viewpoints that overlook major travel routes and water sources. Their creation required massive engineering efforts that seem disproportionate to any obvious practical purpose. The guardian stones were first noted in aerial photographs taken during the 1980s, but their artificial nature wasn't recognized until detailed ground surveys revealed tool marks and evidence of deliberate shaping. The faces are enormous, with features measuring several meters across, visible from distances of multiple kilometers. Creating these monuments would have required coordinated efforts by large groups working over extended periods. Thousands of tons of rock had to be removed using only stone tools and primitive techniques. The scale of modification suggests social organization and labor coordination beyond what archaeological evidence indicates for prehistoric Serra da Capivara populations. Each guardian stone faces a specific direction that corresponds to astronomical alignments or important landscape features. Some watch sunrise and sunset positions during seasonal transitions, while others gaze toward distant mountain peaks or water sources that would have been crucial for regional survival. The faces show remarkable consistency in their proportions and expressions despite being created at different locations by potentially different groups over spans of centuries. This standardization implies shared cultural traditions and possibly centralized planning that coordinated these massive construction projects. Tool marks on the guardian stones indicate that their creators used techniques similar to those employed in other rock modifications throughout the park. However, the scale and precision of the carving far exceeds anything else attempted by the region's prehistoric inhabitants. Carbon dating of organic materials found in association with the guardian stones suggests construction between 5,000 and 3,000 years ago, during the period of most sophisticated cultural development at Serra da Capivara. This timing corresponds with the creation of the geometric rock art, acoustic stones, and underground chamber systems. Local oral traditions describe the guardian stones as protectors left by ancient peoples to watch over the land after their departure. These stories claim that the faces can still see and judge the actions of people who enter their territory, punishing those who show disrespect or harmful intentions. Some copper working requires sophisticated knowledge of mining, smelting, and metalworking techniques that typically develop only in complex agricultural societies. The hunter-gatherer populations of prehistoric Serra da Capivara showed no other evidence of metallurgical knowledge, using only simple stone tools and organic materials for their technological needs. Chemical analysis revealed that the copper contained trace elements consistent with or sources located over 1,500 kilometers away in the Andes Mountains. This implied either extensive trade networks or population movements that connected the Serra da Capivara region with distant societies. The geometric patterns on the copper sheets matched designs found in contemporary rock art at the same site. This correlation suggested that the objects were created by local populations rather than acquired through trade. Yet the technical knowledge required for their manufacture seemed inconsistent with the simple technologies used for other purposes. Dr. Guyton's team spent months conducting additional excavations around the discovery site, searching for evidence of metalworking activities such as furnaces or processing areas or copperworking tools. Despite extensive investigation, no supporting evidence for local metallurgy was found. The three-dimensional copper object proved particularly puzzling. Its complex internal structure included precisely manufactured chambers, channels, and moving components that fit together with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. Creating such precision would challenge modern manufacturing techniques. Yet somehow, prehistoric craftspeople achieved these specifications using unknown methods. X-ray imaging revealed that the object contained internal components invisible from the surface. These hidden elements included springs, gears, and mechanical linkages that suggested the device was designed to perform specific functions. However, no comparable artifacts from any prehistoric context provided clues about its intended use. Attempts to determine the object's function through experimental archaeology proved inconclusive. The device showed no obvious signs of wear or use, suggesting it might have served ceremonial rather than practical purposes. Yet, its mechanical complexity implied engineering knowledge that exceeded what would typically be invested in purely symbolic objects. The copper artifacts were found in association with the geometric bone arrangement discovered earlier at the same site. This correlation suggested connections between different technological and artistic traditions that characterized the most sophisticated period of cultural development at Serra da Capivara. Local indigenous oral traditions include references to ancient metalworkers who possessed supernatural abilities to shape and work metals. These stories describe craftspeople who could soften copper with their breath and shape it with their hands, abilities that modern listeners typically interpret as mythological rather than historical accounts. Some oral traditions describe the copper objects as gifts from sky beings who visited the region during ancient times. These stories claim that the metalworking knowledge was taught to selected individuals who were sworn to secrecy about its origins and techniques. Modern metallurgical analysis has failed to identify the specific techniques used to create the copper artifacts. The metal shows no evidence of standard smelting, forging, or casting processes. Instead, The material appears to have been shaped through unknown methods that left no recognizable technological signatures. The preservation of organic copper in the harsh climate of northeastern Brazil is itself remarkable. Copper typically corrodes rapidly under the alternating wet and dry conditions that characterize the region. Yet these artifacts retained their original forms and surface details with minimal deterioration. Electron microscopy revealed that the copper surfaces had been treated with unknown preservation compounds that protected against corrosion for thousands of years. These protective coatings contained organic materials that have not been identified. Despite extensive chemical analysis, the mystery of the copper artifacts deepened when similar objects were reported from other archaeological contexts in South America, always in association with sophisticated rock art and astronomical sites. This pattern suggested a widespread but hidden technological tradition that has largely escaped archaeological detection. Recent advances in analytical chemistry have revealed additional anomalies in the copper composition. Isotope ratios don't match any known sources, suggesting either unknown deposits or artificial modification of the metal's fundamental properties through techniques beyond current understanding. The copper mystery at Serra da Capivara illustrates the limitations of archaeological interpretation when confronted with evidence that doesn't fit established theoretical frameworks. These artifacts represent technological achievements that challenge assumptions about prehistoric capabilities, while providing no clear explanations for their existence or creation. The Watchers in Stonewall. Final mystery of Serra da Capivara involves a series of rock formations that appear to have been deliberately modified to create the impression of giant faces watching over the landscape. These guardian stones are scattered throughout the park, positioned as strategic viewpoints that overlook major travel routes and water sources. Their creation required massive engineering efforts that seemed disproportionate to any obvious practical purpose. The guardian stones were first noted in aerial photographs taken during the 1980s, but their artificial nature wasn't recognized until detailed ground surveys revealed tool marks and evidence of deliberate shaping. The faces are enormous, with features measuring several meters across, visible from distances of multiple kilometers. Creating these monuments would have required coordinated efforts by large groups working over extended periods. Thousands of tons of rock had to be removed using only stone tools and primitive techniques. The scale of modification suggests social organization and labor coordination beyond what archaeological evidence indicates for prehistoric Serra da Capivara populations. Each guardian stone faces a specific direction that corresponds to astronomical alignments or important landscape features. Some watch sunrise and sunset positions during seasonal transitions, while others gaze toward distant mountain peaks or water sources that would have been crucial for regional survival. The faces show remarkable consistency in their proportions and expressions despite being created at different locations by potentially different groups over spans of centuries. This standardization implies shared cultural traditions and possibly centralized planning that coordinated these massive construction projects. Tool marks on the guardian stones indicate that their creators used techniques similar to those employed in other rock modifications throughout the park. However, the scale and precision of the carving far exceeds anything else attempted by the region's prehistoric inhabitants. Carbon dating of organic materials found in association with the guardian stones suggests construction between 5,000 and 3,000 years ago, during the period of most sophisticated cultural development at Serra da Capivara. This timing corresponds with the creation of the geometric rock art, acoustic stones, and underground chamber systems. Local oral traditions describe the guardian stones as protectors left by ancient peoples to watch over the land after their departure. These stories claim that the faces can still see and judge the actions of people who enter their territory, punishing those who show disrespect or harmful intentions. Some traditions describe rituals conducted at the guardian stones during specific astronomical events. These ceremonies supposedly activated the protective powers of the monuments, ensuring continued surveillance and spiritual protection for the surrounding landscape. Modern photographic documentation has revealed that the guardian stones show subtle changes in expression under different lighting conditions. Shadows cast by the carved features create optical illusions that make the faces appear to follow observers as they move through the landscape. The psychological impact of these monuments on ancient visitors must have been profound. Travelers entering the Serra da Capivara region would have encountered multiple giant faces watching their movements, creating an environment where human activities occurred under constant supernatural observation. Geological analysis indicates that the guardian stones were carved from particularly hard rock formations that have resisted weathering better than surrounding materials. This careful selection of durable stone suggests that the creators intended their monuments to survive for thousands of years. The positioning of guardian stones creates sightlines that connect different parts of the Serra da Capivara region into a unified surveillance network. From any major travel route, at least one guardian face is visible, creating the impression of comprehensive observation and control. Some guardian stones show evidence of maintenance and repair work conducted centuries after their initial creation. Missing features were recarved, damaged surfaces were smoothed, and new details were added to enhance the visual impact of the monuments. The abandonment of the guardian stones coincides with the general cultural collapse that ended prehistoric occupation of Serra da Capivara. The final maintenance work appears hurried and incomplete, suggesting that the social systems supporting these monuments had begun to break down. Modern conservation efforts focus on documenting and protecting the guardian stones from continued weathering and potential vandalism. These monuments represent some of South America's most impressive prehistoric sculpture, yet they remain largely unknown outside specialized archaeological circles. The guardian stones of Serra da Capivara stand as silent witnesses to vanished civilizations whose achievements continue to challenge our understanding of prehistoric human capabilities. These ancient faces still watch over the landscape, their creators long forgotten but their artistic in engineering, legacy preserved in stone. As our journey through the mysteries of Serra da Capivara comes to an end, we're left with more questions than answers. The evidence suggests sophisticated knowledge systems, complex technologies, and cultural achievements that seem inconsistent with traditional models of prehistoric development. The people who created these wonders remain anonymous, their individual stories lost to time, yet their collective legacy persists in painted rocks, carved calendars, acoustic instruments, and guardian monuments that continue to puzzle researchers and inspire wonder in visitors who encounter them. Perhaps that's the most fitting conclusion to these mysteries, not definitive answers, but continued questions that remind us how much we still don't know about human history and capabilities. The silence of Serra da Capivara holds secrets that may never be fully revealed, preserving the ancient mysteries for future generations to contemplate and explore. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Brazil's most enigmatic archaeological sight. As you drift towards sleep, let your mind wander through these painted caves and among these guardian stones, where ancient peoples left traces of knowledge and achievement that continue to whisper across the millennia. Sleep well and dream of the watchers in stone who still keep their eternal vigil over the red cliffs of Serra da Capivara